Welcome to Audacity Works, a podcast inspired by and dedicated to the working artist, the creative entrepreneur, and generally, doing the damn thing. This exists on the premise that the world belongs to those who have the audacity to believe that their lives have value. This is for you. Welcome to Audacity Works. I am your host, Rachel Strickland, and this is episode number 102, and it is about what to do if you are bored with your discipline. The first thing that I want to acknowledge is the grief associated with boredom, particularly when you have loved something and let it love you back and given it so much of yourself and so much of your resources only to find that you're bored. Who among us has not been in a relationship that was comfortable and loving and not even a bad relationship, and then you just realize this isn't doing it for me, and that realization carries with it a great deal of grief because you know that something has to change. Now, this podcast is not about relationships. It is about the relationship you have with your discipline, but I really liken it to the loss of a relationship because you've outgrown each other. Because sometimes this happens, and it happens even if you have been investing in your discipline for decades. It can still happen. So I want to acknowledge the grief that comes with boredom, because it is a loss. It is something that has been lost, and if you're feeling grief about it, go ahead and grieve about it. And the reason that I really want to acknowledge the grief is because a lot of times we will just ignore this boredom and try to work through it, push through it, keep doing it anyway. And that's not even bad to do. But I think there are better alternatives. So let's consider ways that you can deal if you find you are out of love with your discipline and you're bored. My preferred method for dealing with this is probably not one that you're going to want to take me up on, but hear me out. I think if you are bored with your discipline, you should take a break from it. And I don't mean a weekend. How about a month? What if you took a month and weren't allowed to engage in your discipline in the same way that you've been engaging, and instead you took that month to purposefully and intentionally explore anything else that you found interesting? I am talking ceramics classes. I am talking vocal lessons. They don't have to be lessons, of course, but it's always a good idea to try something new if you find that you're bored with your old ways. And even if it's not new, what about other things that you used to love that you don't do anymore because your primary discipline took all of your time and energy and focus? So what buried things in the back of the closet? What art supplies have you purchased and forgotten about? What are those things? And just give yourself a month to investigate whatever you feel is interesting. Here are some ideas off the top of my head. Cooking, gardening, writing, drawing, finger paints, acrylic pours, memorizing a monologue, woodworking, taking a dance class, taking something apart to find out how it works and putting it back together again, or failing to put it back together again. Make sure you have more than one of these things, I guess, or that it was cheap. So a dear friend was confiding in me about a week or so ago that they were super bored with their discipline. They're like, I just don't want to, I don't feel the thing. I don't want to practice. It just feels like a slog. I'm like, how about you just stop doing it for a while? And then I sort of sat with that, like, what if you stop doing it for like a month and just set a timer, put it in your calendar and be like, this month is for exploration only. And the more I thought about that advice, even though I know it's difficult advice to follow, I think, but I got more and more excited by it because I was like, well, shit, I want to do that. I want to do that. What might we discover if we just gave ourselves permission? One, not allowed to engage in the old discipline, just not allowed. Let's see if we miss it. Let's see if we miss it. And also to explore any other thing that captures your fancy. I think probably the most difficult part about this for the circus artist in the room is that if you've specialized in a discipline, you probably teach it also. And if you're still teaching a discipline, that's not a break. That's not a break. So taking a break from teaching that particular discipline might result in a loss of income, which is something that we would want to be prepared for and have made allowances for. The experience of both specializing in a discipline as well as teaching it at the same time is kind of like this perfect storm that I find leads to burnout for so many artists. And we know why it happens, right? It's much more reliable to earn money from teaching than it is performing, depending on what time of year it is. Also, there's just more income available because people want to be learning. But I also think that teaching a discipline accesses so much of the same energy pot as it does to create work. So it's no wonder so many artists, once they're here, like working with me, they say, well, I wanted to do this, but I don't have any energy for it left because I give it all to my students. And like, that's a problem. That's something that we need to make a choice about. And it can either be a choice to focus on a different kind of income that allows a different part of your brain to be utilized, or something else. So that is my official stance. Like, if you are bored with your discipline, take a break from it. And like, not a week, a month. I don't think a week is long enough. A month is long enough. Like, you can lose a week because you got a cold. And I feel like we need enough iterations of days being born and sunsets over and over and over again before we can see some new patterns emerge. And new patterns not only like inside of yourself, but also in how you are interacting with your environment. And you may surprise yourself. I hope you do surprise yourself. I hope someone somewhere will try this besides me, because I'm definitely going to try it. And you may be surprised to find that your practice and your discipline is a lot more resilient than you fear that it is. I've had so many conversations with friends where they're like, I think I just want to quit. I don't think I want to do this anymore. I'm like, you go ahead, quit. See if it works. See if it works. Your practice, your business, like these things are more resilient and more enduring than we give them credit for. If you want to stop, and I don't just mean your discipline, I mean the whole kit and caboodle. You want to stop doing this? Stop. See if it works. Whatever you learn in the meantime is going to be useful information, but only if we are brave enough to give ourselves the chance to access that information by trying something new or new way of doing things. In addition to this prescribed month of doing whatever the fuck you want and chasing whatever fancies come up for you, I would also recommend that you consume different forms of artwork. Listen to different music than you generally would. Watch a movie that you would never just watch before. Give yourself some different food, some different ingredients for your brain soup, and see what you come out with. Other things that you can do if you find that you're bored with your discipline are to hire someone to put some movement onto you. This is specifically for the movement artists and particularly for the circus artists and aerialists. But maybe you're bored with your old tricks because you need some new tricks. So maybe somebody else can put some movement on your body and you can see how that feels. Because honestly, there's this cultural story around passion, that passion is lifelong And it's an unfaltering flame that will guide those lucky few who find out what their passion actually is, and it will carry them through their lives. And this, my friends, is a lie. Because your practice may indeed be more resilient than you give it credit for, but passion isn't. It's kind of thin. It's fun and it's sexy and it's awesome when it shows up. But if you're listening to this podcast, you have already discovered that if you only go in to practice your discipline when you feel like it, you're not going to get very far. Because passion isn't a reliable fuel. Inspiration isn't a reliable fuel. So what are some more reliable fuels? One, discipline. And I know that might be a funny thing for me to say when I just told you to quit what you're doing for a month and do something else, but I do stand by it. However, when you're mid-career and you're not necessarily bored, but you just don't feel like going in, you don't feel like doing the thing, but your discipline will have created a structure to support you, which is extremely useful and a pro tip. More forms of a more robust fuel to keep you going are interest. Interest is like just a tiny little spark, a little bit of curiosity. You're like, oh, I wonder what would happen if I did that. And I think that it is not as glamorous as passion. Follow your passions. But it is a lot easier to tap into. And more to the point, there's a lot less baggage surrounding just being interested in something. Whereas passion carries these huge connotations. It's like, you must do this. Your life depends on it. Bah. What if it didn't have to be such a big fucking deal to just do what you wanted to do? And you're like, well, this is interesting to me today. And then maybe the next day it's not interesting. You try something else. So I would say, yes, interest and discipline. Kind of ho-hum, kind of boring, not very sexy, but reliable. They're reliable. Also, ambition is reliable. Now, don't confuse ambition with passion, okay? Passion is a feeling, right? Ambition is something that's it's like a stretch goal, right? And where I think ambition is the most powerful is when it is coupled with our idea of ourselves and the version of ourselves that we most want to be. So then it becomes not even about achieving this or that, or receiving this accolade or that award, or working for this or that company, but rather it is about being able to live inside the version of yourself that you know you'll be once you're doing those things. And I also want to address the possibility that you might be bored with your discipline because you did it already. Now I'm going to tell you a little story. I have a friend, Scott Cameron, pretty legendary in the San Francisco scene. He's a rigger, and before he was a rigger, he worked for Club Med and taught flying trapeze for a really long time. And we were in Seattle doing a gig together. We were at Emerald City Trapeze Arts, which has a huge indoor flying trapeze rig. And we had been on the other side sort of setting up for the gig, and a class was going on the flying rig. And he just sort of like paused near the net, and he was looking up and watching them fly. And I was stopped, and I was looking at his face, and I'm like, I wonder what... Oh, he maybe he's feeling sad right now, or like maybe he's feeling wistful for yesteryear. And he's just watching them fly, and he gets this smile on his face, and he says, I don't miss this at all. And it was quite a beautiful moment. It really stuck in my head because the peace on his face was profound. He didn't miss it. He wasn't sitting there like having this aching, nostalgic memory. He was feeling peaceful because what he was doing right now is what he was interested in. And he didn't miss the flying trapeze because he did it already. That chapter was closed for him. And there was so much just freedom on his face in that moment. I'd never forgot it. So if you are in a place where you're like, well, I just wish that I had this passion back. I wish that I loved this the way that I used to. Maybe you don't because you did it already. And maybe your next great love is waiting for you. You know, you're not dead yet. Boredom can be painful, especially when it used to be love. But it's also a gift. So by the time you are listening to this, I will, if you listen to it on Wednesday mornings when it comes out, I'll be on a plane. So look up and wave at me. I'm flying from South Carolina to LAX because I get to be in the room and walk with giants at BossUp, held by two heroes of mine, Dr. Shantae Cofield and Jill Fitt. And I can't believe that they're going to give me a microphone and let me speak to this room, and I'ma do it. I am so excited. Also, super nervy about it. But I'm more excited than nervy because I'm prepared. That's kind of all you can do, is prepare. I also don't like to over-prepare because then I get what? What do I get? What do I get if I over-prepare? Bored. And I don't want to be bored. I want to be interested. I am extremely interested in what is about to happen. And I hope that you are too. This is a little bit of a shorter episode today because I have got to get all of the packing done. And so I'm going to be short and I'm going to be sweet. And I'm going to say thank you so much for letting me talk into your ear for almost 20 minutes. Without you, I'm just a woman sitting in her office talking to herself. So it means a lot to me. For anyone who listens to the podcast, thank you for being here. And this podcast is powered by Patreon. So an extra special shout out to my patrons for making this podcast and so much more that I do possible in the first place. Thank you for standing with me. In benediction, may you be interested. And don't go back to sleep.